This is a very brief overlook of the topic of mental health in the built environment, and I'm approaching this on a systems-based perspective. Systems, according to Bill Reed, are energy and relationship with a purpose. And systems can be found at every level of living organisms. Systems thinking is a regenerative system consisting of diversity, expansion, mutation, and change. And the system is always seeking dynamic equilibrium. Resilience is an aspect of a healthy system. It's the capacity to withstand stress. And then energy flow is maintained through constant adaptation and regulation of interacting processes. So this image describes nested systems whereby one system is contained within another, but it's also interacting with others. This quote from John Dewey talks about the organism in nature and the nervous system in the organism and the brain in the nervous system and the cortex in the brain. And he sees this as the most important way to understand our condition as living beings. So I put together this stress scale with various systems in a nested format. The most inner of the rings is a new measure of feeling safe, developing psychometric properties of the neuroception of psychological safety, based on the work of Stephen Porges. And each of these rings shows a spectrum from sick or toxic to secure or healing. And that includes a scale for the natural and man-made environments, for John Bowlby's attachment theory, and for systems health. And the point of this is to illustrate how one of these systems can be impacted by essentially all of the others. Stress is an ongoing issue in all systems, and it can promote change in a healthy way by causing the system to adapt. In our human body, there's a process by which we adapt to stress, which involves all of the systems, including the central nervous system, the immune system, and the endocrine system. And that process is known as allostasis. If stress is not properly processed, it can accumulate, resulting in what's called allostatic load and unreleased stress, which causes dysregulation. This can be a cause of both mental and physical illness. This is a blackboard illustration shows how stress is a factor in cancer. Allostatic stress causes inflammation and disrupts the immune system. And if you experience allostatic stress, you become dysregulated. It was Esther Sternberg in her book, The Balance Within, who described how separate disciplines fused in a means of communicating stress and allostasis to the central nervous system. Endocrinology and immunology actually work together and address what stress the organism is under. Traumatic stress involves environmental load, chronic and toxic exposure to stress. It can result in the freeze shutdown response, social isolation, and it's also caused by incarceration. This process begins in the womb. The fetus is exposed to maternal hormones and exists in the context of the mother's bodily systems. The fetus hears the heartbeat and other sounds from within the body. It's very in touch with the sound of voices outside the body and the mother's voice. Prosody is the tone of voice which conveys an emotional message, and this is the basis of all verbal communication in mammals, and to which the human system is highly sensitive. The actual physical birth of the infant takes place before what has been called the psychological birth. And this takes place in the first 18 to 24 or 36 months based on the quality of the relationship between an infant and the mother in terms of that vocalization, communication, touch, response, and essentially availability of the mother figure to the infant's developing brain and central nervous system. Resonance is a concept frequently raised in neuroscience regarding the brain activity. There are cycles of brain activity, and resonance implies a connection at a deep level between two or more individuals. It's obviously the basis of musical attraction and also emotional attraction, and can be seen in art responses and also in the built environment. This slide describes the proto-conversation, the earliest forms of communication between the adult and the child, and how it actually forms the brain, specifically the right brain connection to emotion and communication, the social connection platform. And it's a vital and necessary stage in the growth of the toddler, or excuse me, the infant, as they approach the toddler stage. And that work is described in terms of physiology and neurophysiology by Alan Shore in his book, The Development of the Unconscious Mind. And it confirms what was described half a century before by Margaret Mahler and others in her book, Psychological Birth of the Human Infant. Emotions promote social interactions and synchronize brain activity across individuals. And Mahler essentially said the same thing. So let's return to this topic of regulation and dysregulation. It's the key barometer of well-being, and it depends largely on this process called neuroception, described by Stephen Porges. Neuroception represents a neural process that enables humans and other mammals to engage in social behaviors by distinguishing safe from dangerous contexts. And it's very connected to that idea of prosody. If you sense that somebody is approaching you warmly with an intent to connect on a safe basis, your neuroception will allow you to drop your guard and become connected, to resonate with that other individual. All of this takes place subliminally, which is the key to the right hemisphere. Smell, taste, vision, hearing, touch produce biological reactions at staggering speeds. Cognitive neuroscientists believe we're conscious of only about 5% of our mental activity. The rest of our experience is below the cognitive process, but the brain is absorbing all this stimuli constantly. Sense is the basis of all this subliminal perception. Touch is one of the more powerful cognitive communication vehicles. It releases oxytocin, and also it attributed to the feelings of trust, generosity, compassion, and lowered anxiety, which you would experience with regulation. So here's an example of how architecture promotes a reliable sense of rhythm and repetition to a disordered streetscape. You can see it in various aspects of the public realm. This looks almost like a music score if you read it from left to right. The situation inside a courtyard does the same thing. Along a street where trajectory structure is manifest in the building design. So the book Your Brain on Arts does an excellent job of describing how this functions from a neurological level with neurochemicals, and how helpful it can be in terms of mental health challenges and in attaining regulation and improved communication. The principal factors of mental illness are chronic stress, isolation, and stigma or discrimination. We experience ongoingly an intentional traumatization of shock and awe, school shootings, terrorism, racism, and gaslighting. It's all part of our modern culture. And we can even see it in architectural form, where the intent is to shock, and whether intended or not, the result is to dysregulate. The two key factors of well-being are agency and the quality of relationships, both of which find their foundation in that early maternal connection. And embodied cognition is our natural ability to live and become what we are through our engagement with our environments, perceptions, feelings, emotions, thoughts, valuations, and actions consequent to our physical embodied transactions with our physical reactions. The opposite of embodiment is dissociation, which is a result of massive psychobiological stress associated with attachment trauma, which impairs development of the attachment control system and sets the stage for the characterological use of the right brain defense of pathological dissociation when encountering later socio-emotional stressors. Environmental regulation is the solution, can be done in a variety of ways. More information than we can go into in this brief discussion. We invite you to join us at thehappy.org to learn more.